Okay, welcome everybody. Let's see if I can get this quick. We're going to talk about geometric sequences. Okay, your definition is basically where my my first term equals a. Don't worry about that. But basically, my nth term equals some factor, or what we call a common ratio, times the preceding term, n minus 1. We realize if we've got a sub n, the nth term, the one that comes right before it is n minus 1. So if that's 10, that's the ninth term. So some factor times the ninth term gets me the 10th term. Okay? So if I want the 11th term, the common ratio, or factor, times the 10th term gets me the 11th term. The ratio times the 12th terms gets me the 13th term. Okay? So a ratio times the preceding term gets me the nth term. Okay? Here's two geometric sequences. 1, 3, 9, 27. What's this factor? Well, let's take a to the n divided by a to the n minus 1, the preceding term. 3 divided by 1 equals 9 divided by 3 equals 27 divided by 9 equals 3. That's my common ratio. Okay? Alright, so that's a geometric sequence. All the numbers are related by a common ratio. Okay, let's look at this sequence. My common ratio is a fraction. 64, 16, 4, 1. 16 over 64, 1/4, equals 4 over 16 equals 1/4. This over this divided by this. So a term divided by its preceding term gets you your common ratio. A term divided by its preceding term gets you your common ratio. Okay? 1 divided by 4 equals 1 divided by 1/4. 1 divided by 1/4 is 1/4. Okay? And so on. Okay? Notice I'm multiplying everything by, my common ratio here is 1/4. 64 times 1/4 gets me 16 times 1/4 gets me 4, and so on. So here's my common ratio is 1/4. Okay, so you can be going smaller by a fraction or getting bigger. Okay. One thing to notice, like I said here, I multiply 1/4 to the first power. Here it's to the second power. Here to the third power. But notice, this is my fourth term. It's kind of like the common difference in the nth term. Remember, we're always one less. So if I want to take my initial term and I want to get the fourth term, 1, 2, 3, 4, I multiplied my first term by the common ratio 3 times or to the third power. If I want the sixth term, I would multiply it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get the sixth term. Okay? So we start off with the first term. To get the sixth term, I'll multiply by that common ratio 5 times to the fifth power. So it's 1 less than the term. Very similar to arithmetic, okay? So to get the nth term for geometric, it's very simple. It's the same components, basically, in a way. Instead of common difference, we have a common ratio. But to get the nth term, I take the first term and times it by the common ratio to the n minus 1 power, because it's always 1 less than that term, because we're given the first term. Okay? So if I want the 16th term, a to the 16 equals my first term, which is going to be a to the 1 times my ratio of 6 to the 15th power. Okay? So in this case, I want the 20th term. Okay? What's my 20th term? Well, my first term here is 1, 3, 9. Here's my first term, 1. My common ratio is 3 divided by 1, or 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay? I want the 20th power. What's n minus 1 is 19. Okay? So this would be 1 times 3 to the 19th power. Alright? Okay. That would get you the nth term. Alright, here's a lot of stuff. But basically, we'll do this later. We did this on the CBA. But the sum of the first 20 terms of my geometric sequence. plus, okay? And basically you might be plus, 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 okay? But it's your first term. This is a formula, and here's a fraction. It's 1 minus your ratio to the n, not n minus 1, but to the n. 1 minus r to the n over 1 minus r, okay? So in this case, my ratio is 1/2. 8 over 16 is 1/2. 4 over 8 is 1/2. 1 over 2 is 1/2. So I'll basically have 1 minus 1/2 to the n power. In this case, if you wanted the first 20 terms, or let me, you plug in 20, okay? Over 1 minus r. Now notice, these are going to be negative numbers usually, except this time it won't be fraction. But you have you could have, if your ratio is 4, 1 minus 4 to the 19th power, but you'll have a negative number on top of a negative number. It'll be positive, okay? All right? So for this one, I'm just going to, here's a sequence where my ratio is 1/2. If I want the sum of the first 20 terms, my first a to 1 is 16, and here I've got 1 minus, and I plug in 0.5, or 1/2, and plug in 0.5 down here. So 1 minus 0.5 to the 20th power on top of 1 minus 0.5, and that would get me my sum, okay? Now you notice what I have up here. This is another way of doing it. Basically, if I'm asking for this, the 20th term, okay, and I want you to emphasize this. Remember, you're plugging in this formula, you're plugging in n, not n minus 1, okay? This formula here with sigma, that's the summation figure that says let's take the sum of the first n terms, whatever n is. K equals 1. So let me backtrack, so I know I've just introduced K. So remember, this was on our CBA, right? If I wanted the 20th term, or the 5th term, or the 6th term, we just went over this, it'd be my initial term times the ratio, and if I wanted let's say the nth term, let's say n is 20, well I'm going to take K all the way up to 20. This represents K goes all the way up. It's kind of confusing, but K takes on any number, go all the way up to what n is. If n is 20, we'll go up to 20. So remember, if we want the 20th term, it's 20 minus 1, 19. So the 20th term is a times r to the 19th power. Okay? But this says right here to sum all those terms. A times r to the first, a times r to the second, a times r to the third, and sum all those up, all the way up to what? The 20th term, which would be a times r to the 19th. Okay? So we're going to do this later with the calculator. But right now, for manually, I want you to focus on this formula right here. Okay? All right? A to the 1 times 1 minus r to the n over 1 minus r. Okay? So that's the sum of my first n term equals a to the 1, and in parentheses, 1 minus r to the n power. And that's not parentheses, it's just r to the n power. It's just r to the n over 1 minus r. Use your fraction feature on the calculator. Control divide, okay? Alright, so that's the sum, and that's basically all we're going to have to do tomorrow, okay? One last thing I might add. Remember arithmetic sequence. The last thing with arithmetic is, if you wanted to sum for certain, remember the formula is n over 2 times a1 plus a to the n. I might give you some problems where you have to figure out the nth term, okay, and then plug that in. That's pretty easy. Just like, remember, a to the 1 plus n minus 1 times d, and then we get the nth term, and then you can figure out, if I wanted the sum of the first 50 terms, 50 over 2 times my first term, and we figure out the 50th term because we know the first, we know 50 minus 1 is 49, you should know the common difference, and so on. That's all I have. Okay, we're just going to work with geometric sequences and know those formulas, okay? All right, hopefully you took good notes.